The Senior Reset podcast delivers education and resources to help seniors and their families set themselves up for success. Each week, we dive deep with medical professionals and industry leaders to bring you answers to the questions that matter most. From the latest medical advice to financial strategies to staying ahead of scams, we'll build the toolkit you need to thrive. Here's your host, Joel Stewart.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Senior Reset Podcast. We are talking resources, education, solutions, entertainment, and training for the senior community and their families. I have with us today a couple here from our Signal Health Group location in Indiana. We have our co-host, Nicole Farmer, and we also have Janna McCourt, who is the Administrator and Director of Nursing for Signal Health Group. She's going to be talking with us a little bit today about blood pressure. What is blood pressure? What do those numbers even mean? Why is it important? How you doing today, Janna?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Could you just kick us off and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Well, I've only been a nurse for about 13 years, but I was a nurse practically all my life because my brother was in a car accident when I was like 18 years old. And he had a C6, C7 injury, which made him a quadriplegic. So after his accident, after he did his rehab, he came and lived with me, and I took care of him for 18 years. So once he passed away, I had to do something with my life, so I went to nursing school. And one of my first jobs was in home health care. And I loved it so much because, I was already a caregiver. So I understood what it was to caregive, and I understood what it was to, come into somebody's home. And I just had the natural ability of feeling very comfortable going into other people's homes. And I think the reason why I was like that is because I was a caregiver for all those years. So adding my nursing degree onto my already lifelong experience, going into home health, I loved it, and I didn't want to do anything else, but I have done a few other things in my career. So, but I always come back to home health.
We sucker right back in.
All right. So with blood pressure, so can you give us maybe a little bit of background with blood pressure? And, why is it important to keep track of it?
Well, monitoring your blood pressure is important because it evaluates your general health. It evaluates how the progress of diseases you might have. It assists assist your physician in diagnosing different things, mainly blood pressure, high blood pressure. It helps you to evaluate how your treatment is going. And it helps in early diagnosis of heart-related diseases and other diseases related to high blood pressure, like kidney disease, CHF, hypertension. A lot of disease processes have hypertension as one of the main symptoms. So monitoring your blood pressure is very important, especially if you have been told you have hypertension and you're on a medication.
So hypertension, that's where one of the chambers of your heart starts getting a little bit bigger because of the high blood pressure, or?
No, the numbers for the blood pressure, like the top number, is what we call the systolic blood pressure. It measures the pressure of the blood flowing through your arteries when the heart beats. So as your heart beats, that first number is the pressure against your arteries. So The diastolic, which is the bottom number, is actually how much pressure of your blood is going through your heart at rest. So you have one measuring how it's flowing as it's going through, pushing against the arteries, and the bottom number is at rest.
What do you generally like to see for those numbers?
Well, normal is 120/80. That's the general consensus. But blood pressure, it varies for everybody. I mean, my norm may not be somebody else's norm. Older people generally have a lower blood pressure. I don't know, maybe because they're not as active. I don't know the reason why, but sometimes they can have a higher blood pressure if they have kidney disease, especially if they're on dialysis. Their blood pressure tends to be more elevated than a normal person, their same age. I had this patient one time that had, he was on dialysis, and he always had really high blood pressure, and he was taking a lot of medication. But when you're on dialysis, it's 3 days a week they're taking all of your blood and filtering everything out of it. So your medication doesn't always stay in there to be effective, because a lot of medications have to be in your system for a period of time to be effective. So, but then, I've had a lot of patients that their blood pressure is really low for some reason. And they may be on a lot of medications, but it may be because they have some kind of heart situation that the doctor likes for their blood pressure to be low. Now, if it gets too low, you pass out. So you don't want it too low.
Yeah. That's not a good thing.
No.
So if someone's blood pressure remains elevated, it sounds like it could be a warning sign that there's something wrong somewhere in the hearts and the organs. There's something going wrong. But are there other dangers from having, a high blood pressure for like an extended period of time? Like, I imagine you're saying that number is how much pressure is on your arteries and your veins. So what happens if you have lots of pressure on all of your internal piping, if you will, for your blood over a long period of time? Doesn't sound like it would be good.
No, it can actually damage your heart, and it can damage your arteries. So, but high blood pressure, according to the Heart Association, is the silent killer, because you really don't have any symptoms until it's already done some damage. So that's why another reason why it's important to keep your doctor's appointments and, keep a record of your blood pressure. I mean, you don't have to take it every day, but taking it weekly, and then taking that blood pressure to your physician at your regular appointment and having him review it. Because if you just have one blood pressure that's high, the doctor is not going to put you on a medication. But if it's consistently high or very elevated, then they're more likely to prescribe you some kind of medication to lower that. But you don't want to have high blood pressure, because it can also damage your heart, your kidneys, and your brain. Going without treatment can cause TIAs, which is the transient ischemic attacks, stroke. You can have a stroke, heart attack. It can enlarge your heart. It can cause peripheral artery disease. aneurysms, kidney disease, and it can even break the vessels in your eyes. So having high blood pressure is not a good thing. But, unless you go to your doctor frequently, or, you go to your doctor like I do. I go to my doctor all the time. I feel like I live at my doctor's. But, keeping your regular appointments, doing a check of your blood pressure is going to give your physician a better idea of what your normal blood pressure is. And if it's always elevated, above that 120 or over 80, then eventually he's going to put you, or he or she is going to put you on some medication to help lower that. They might also put you on a cholesterol medicine, because high cholesterol and high blood pressure are not good, and they're not good together. So, controlling your cholesterol and what you eat is important too when you have high blood pressure.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of dietary changes that make a difference with that kind of thing.
Yeah, no salt, watch what you're eating. A lot of older people are on a fixed income, and maybe they might be living alone, or it's just, uh, a spouse that lives with you. Making meals and going to the grocery store becomes hard to do. So a lot of times they'll buy those pre-made TV dinners. Well, back in my day,
I
that
used
was
to
a
live
big
off
thing.
those myself when I was younger.
Yeah,
That's how I
the
got through
apple
college, I
dessert.
think.
I always liked the apple dessert. But anyway, I mean, they'll make shortcuts, and they'll get those pre-made meals, or they'll get canned soup. Those meals, if you look at the sodium level, is way above what any of us should ever eat. Because they use that salt to help in the preservation of the meal. So staying away from canned soups, the pre-made meals, and even the ones that are called good for you, the healthy ones. If you look at the sodium content, it's like way up there,
Yeah, I used to look at those too. I think they're called healthy because there's half as much food in there.
right,
Makes it
right.
reduce calories.
Yeah.
Until you eat two of them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, wow. Well, so what about low blood pressure? So high blood pressure is putting force onto, every artery in your body and your brain, your organs, everywhere. And so low blood pressure is the resting rate of just the resting pressure. So what kind of happens with low blood pressure over time if you're struggling on that side?
Well, low blood pressure can cause, blurry vision, confusion, dizziness, fainting, lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, sleepiness, weakness. So the problems with those things is that when your blood pressure goes too low too fast, you actually have what they call syncope, and you can pass out, which that's not a good thing, because if you pass out, you might fall, hit your head, crack your head open, fall, break a bone, maybe you're driving your car, and your blood pressure drops real fast. You might have an accident. So low blood pressure is not good either. I mean, really low. We didn't mention that high blood pressure is anything greater than 130 over 80. And if your blood pressure gets over 180 over 120, that is a hypertensive crisis. And if it gets up that high, you need to be in the emergency room, because that can actually cause those strokes, aneurysms, heart attacks, blah, blah, blah. All
And
those
with the
things we talked about.
and with the strokes, that's where it's like maybe plaque is built up in your arteries and it's like constricting blood flow, which is why your pressure's so high. And then maybe that plaque breaks free and ends up in your brain. Is that
Yes.
that kind of stuff happens?
Yeah. Now, aneurysm is when um maybe the pressure on your arteries and veins is so high that it actually bursts
Just
one of
pops
your,
like a
it just
balloon.
pops. It just pops. You might have like a weak spot in your vein or artery, like an abdominal aneurysm. That's a weakness. So if your blood pressure gets too high, it can actually burst and you can, you know, go blind, or all kinds of things can happen. You can, have paralysis from it. You can bleed out internally and not know. But usually with aneurysm, you have an instant massive headache. So if you have like an instant massive headache that comes on suddenly and doesn't go away with like Tylenol or whatever, or it's so excruciating bad that it feels like your head is going to blow up, you actually need to go to the emergency room, call 911, because something bad is probably happening, like an aneurysm. And, aneurysms, if you have one and it's caught soon enough, they can maybe stop some of the bad things that happen. It's just like having a heart attack. If you get, with those first symptoms, if you get treatment right away, your chances of not having any damage to your heart are greater than if you wait a day while you're having chest pain and, you try to weather through it till you get to the point where you can't stand it anymore, that you're just having so much pain that you can't function. Then that by that time you've already done damage to your heart. So one of the other things that I want to mention about hypotension is, when I was in home health, one of the things I always taught my patients was, I was dealing with older adults. And a lot of times, the older you get, you don't eat right. You may be taking medications that cause constipation. And I always told them about that vagal nerve stimulation. A lot of falls in older adults happen in the bathroom when they're on the toilet, because they're maybe constipated, straining to get it out. It activates that vagal nerve. And then once your vagal nerve is activated, your blood pressure just crashes. And then that's when you have that syncope where you just faint. So that happened to my dad once. And he fell, and it looked like he'd been through the war or something. He had, big black eye. His whole side of his face was bruised up, because when he fell and hit the sink. So it's very important that as you get older, not to try to stay away from that constipation, and either seek medical direction on how to counteract constipation. There are many stool softeners. You can eat prunes, you can drink prune juice, lots of fruits and vegetables. Meat has a tendency to cause constipation. there's bulking agents like Miralax, which Miralax is one of those medications that is tasteless. You can mix it with any kind of fluid, but what it does is it's a bulking agent. So it gets into your stool and it acts like a sponge and it draws fluid from your body into your stool. That's what keeps it soft. So, but it can also, if you don't drink enough, it can also be the opposite, and it can cause constipation. So, if you're on Miralax, you got to make sure you're drinking enough water every day.
Yeah, that vagus nerve is something that I think everybody should at least be aware of, because it could start triggering at any point, from my understanding. I've had a little bit of experience with it, and it could be from the sight of blood, it could be from a lot of different triggers.
Oh yeah.
And what happens, your blood pressure, from what I understand, is the veins in your legs swell up, your blood starts to pool, your blood pressure just collapses, and even your heart can stop. I had an episode where my heart stopped for a period of time. And so, but yeah, it's where you have to be really, really cognizant. If you start feeling lightheaded, you get on the ground. It doesn't matter if you're in public. It doesn't matter if you're on the toilet. You start feeling that lightheadedness come on suddenly. That means your blood pressure is dropping through the floor, and you might not realize how close you are to just, and when you black out, like, from my own personal experience,
you don't know what's happening.
You're gone. Yeah. You're sitting up one day, and then pretty soon you feel like you're waking up groggily and you're on the floor, and and you've probably fallen into a lot of things on the way down and not realized it's honestly really scary. So
I mean, there's lots of different things that can cause, syncope or that drop in your blood pressure. One is like in older adults, when they get up, if they get up too fast, or they go from a sitting to standing or lying to sitting, they'll get that dizziness, that funny feeling. And that's just because, their blood pressure is not regulating it fast enough when they do those tasks, sitting
yeah.
up or standing. So in older adults, we always advise them, don't get up from a standing position quickly, do it slowly, get your bearings before you take off walking. If you're in bed, when you sit up on the side of the bed and let your legs dangle for a few minutes before you try getting up. Also with and I learned this the hard way, with people that have spinal cord injury, it's very difficult for them to maintain a blood pressure when they go from a lying to a sitting position. So doing it too quickly can actually cause them to have that drop in the blood pressure and have them have that syncope. When my brother first came home from the hospital after his rehab, he wanted to take a shower. Well, we hadn't really gotten our shower business all figured out. My husband and I picked him up and we took him in and put him in the bathroom on one of those little bench seats. And we did it so quickly that his blood pressure dropped. And, I didn't know what was going on. It was the first time it ever happened. And so I'm on the phone calling 911, I think I've killed my brother.
Yeah. Yeah, it can definitely seem that way.
So then my brother-in-law came in and all he did was push him forward and his blood pressure came back up and he, came back to us. But I mean, we had, in my 18 years, we had a lot of those episodes where he would just sit up too fast and he would pass out. He said sometimes he would see remember that little commercial, the cat and the cha-cha-cha. He would say he would see that cat, doing the cha-cha-cha. But really, it's not a funny thing, but I mean, after so many years, you begin to laugh at some of the things that
you've survived.
Yeah, because you can't make this stuff up, it is life, things happen. So
So
yeah.
with low blood pressure, I mean, after one of my episodes, the doctor recommended I have more salt. So it's like the recommendations when you have low blood pressure, kind of the opposite of high, is that more sodium can help. And
yeah, if your blood pressure is on the lower side, they will maybe prescribe that you eat more, have more salt intake, but those are rare and far between. I mean, there
high
are
blood pressure is far more common and problematic.
More people that have high blood pressure than low blood pressure. So, and I mean, a lot of things can bring on high blood pressure, like being overweight, eating too much salt, not getting enough exercise. And
I'm a little attacked here. I should probably go check my blood pressure.
As we get older, we don't like to exercise. I mean, I know I don't. My exercise is walking up the steps to bed every night.
I do one sit up a day. I get up in the morning. That's half.
Yeah.
A old Mark Lowry joke I thought was hilarious.
Lay
Lay down at night. That's the other half.
Drinking too much alcohol or caffeine-based drinks, coffee, tea, Coke, smoking or vaping. Those are two of the things that are one of the major things that bring on high blood pressure. Stress. You have a high stress job.
Nobody's stressed around here nowadays.
Stress can actually bring on high blood pressure. When you go into the doctor's office, a lot of times your blood pressure is a little elevated because, you're in there with the doctor, he's going to ask you all these questions, probably you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, Joel, get it together.
So what they call it, that white coat syndrome, where they're kind of afraid to see the doctor, so their blood pressure is elevated. So they'll wait 20 minutes and then they'll take your blood pressure again. And by the time you sat there for 20 minutes, your blood pressure goes back down. But
yeah, that's a good point. My dad has to have a physical when he was at work when he drove a truck to pass his physical. And if his blood pressure was high, they would tell him to go in, lay down in a dark room for a little bit, kind of relax, and then they would do it again. So that's kind of maybe even a good tip. Like if people are feeling like their blood pressure's high, maybe turn the lights out, kind of try to sit down. And
you can't really feel that your blood pressure.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true.
That's why it's called the silent killer. It's because you don't really have any symptoms of it.
Well, I imagine if your blood pressure is high because of like weight related things, and say you put on a fair amount of weight, your blood pressure is going up, and that causes problems, and then you get on a bunch of medication that's meant to help with the high blood pressure, and that causes more problems. For me, I hate being over medicated. I hate being on any medications at all if I can help it, because they always come with more side effects. I need other medications. And I think it's probably pretty good advice that if you have high blood pressure and you think it's weight related, that it's definitely try to get the weight in check. And because I just from what I've seen with other people and just from my own logical intuition, like if it's there's lots of things that can cause high blood pressure, it sounds like, but if you know that your weight is definitely contributing, that focusing that down is probably much preferable to getting on a whole host of medications, because those can stagger symptom on symptom on symptom and cause a whole other host of issues.
Well, I have autoimmune issues, so I'm on a lot of medication. So I always said I didn't want to be one of those people, but I am one of those people that have a page full of medications. But it is what it is. You have to treat things the best you can, and
I think
deal
we need to
with
have
it.
another guest on here just to talk about autoimmune issues, because that's another thing that's ramping up. We'll have to add it to our educational cat library that we're building here.
Yeah,
But
it's not fun. But with autoimmune disorders, that can elevate your blood pressure too. But just being over the age of 65,
you're not over the age of 65.
I'm
Come
going to
on.
be 61 this year. I'm going to be 61 this year. So I'm getting to that age, but I already have high blood pressure.
My mother just hit 66, and don't tell her, because she gets real upset when you tell her. She's like, 65, I was 65 this year. I'm like, no, we did that last year.
That's
Well,
what
I
you think
told my
because you're
husband last
66
year
now.
we turned 61, and he goes, honey, we're just turned 60 this year. I thought, oh man, I'm one more year closer to retirement, but
I'm going to
There
hang
you
out
go.
here at 29 for a little while and just stay here for a while.
So,
living in a deprived area is also one of those things that can cause high blood pressure.
yeah.
And there's a host of diseases that can cause high blood pressure, like kidney disease, diabetes, long-term kidney infections,
Teenagers.
I'm getting
narrowing
there
of
right
your
now.
narrowing of your arteries that supply your kidneys, hormone problems, lupus, which is an autoimmune, scleroderma, which is an autoimmune disorder, medications like steroids, ibuprofen, and contraceptives and antidepressants can also contribute to high blood pressure.
I don't think there's very many people in America on antidepressants, so that's yeah, I'm just kidding. It's a real problem. So how can people check their blood pressure on a regular basis? I mean, some people like me go to the doctor's office like every 6 months or something for a regular checkup, and we check it then. Is there ways people can check it more often than that?
Well, your best bet is to just buy a home monitor. If you're on a low income or you're on any kind of state funded program like Medicaid, a lot of times your physician can write a script for a monitor. If you have hypertension, and you can get that at the pharmacy. If you're not on one of those things and you can afford it, just buying a unit that is easy for you to operate. And the best way to know that is just to talk to the pharmacist and ask them, tell them, oh, well, I have a little bit of trouble with my hand dexterity. I need something that's going to be simple, that's accurate. They can help guide you into what kind of unit you need, because they have all kinds of units. I mean, they have ones that go on your wrist. They have ones that you just put on your arm and you push a button, and you have a little unit over here. Even nowadays, you can actually get an app that will measure your blood pressure. So yeah, you just put it on your arm and it measures your blood pressure. Of course, that costs you like $12 a month to have. So, I don't have that because I'm not going to pay $12 a month for it.
Worst case
Well, wouldn't
scenario,
you just check it
Walgreens.
yourself?
Worst case scenario, Walgreens, like if they can't afford one and they have the ability, Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, Meijer, those places have ones that you can sit down. You remember being a kid going over and you had to sit down and let that blood pressure.
I don't think they have them anymore.
Yeah, they do. Walmart's actually has a scale too. It tells you how much your BMI is. I don't love that one. I'm right back off there. Like,
When I was in the
love that.
military, we had one of those at the gym where the guys could just check their blood pressure there when they were before the workout.
And a lot of times, you can actually just go into your doctor's office and say, hey, can you take my blood pressure, real quick? And a lot of times they'll do that as a service, just take your blood pressure, because, they don't have a lot of people coming in and asking that question. But if you come in too often, they'll write you a script for one. So
Well, I guess to kind of recap what we talked about today, it sounds like so when you've got blood pressure and your blood pressure is high, like over 130 over 80, is that about the limit? So you start getting over that, you start getting to the realm of high blood pressure. And as that blood pressure goes up, that is putting more pressure on every blood vessel in your entire body, including in your brain. And over time, weak areas can expand out, especially in the brain. It can cause aneurysms. It can expand your heart and cause all kinds of heart problems. And it can generally cause a lot of damage if you have high blood pressure over time, because that pressure is just not good for you. But also there's usually something causing it, whether it's weight or some issue with your organs or something else. There's usually an underlying cause. And so, you generally want to try to, if you can, figure out what that cause is and address that. But short of that, there's dietary changes you can make. There is medication that can help you out to try to get that blood pressure down and avoid some of the worst case scenarios. And I think you said that if it's over like 180, over 120, like that is, you go to the hospital. If it's up there, that is very problematic.
The problem with our older generation, though, is they are on that limited income. And I'm sorry, but Social Security does not pay for our inflation. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone into the homes of clients and opened up the refrigerator to see what they were eating, and there's no food in the refrigerator. And they have to decide, am I gonna buy food this month or am I gonna get my medication? That should never happen in the United States. I mean, we're a wealthy country, and our older adults who have served us all their lives, our veterans, should not be faced with that issue where they have to decide, what am I going to buy this month? Am I going to pay my rent? Am I going to buy my medicine, or am I going to buy food this month? And a lot of times their food choices are poor because the things that are cheap are the things that are bad for you, like soup. I mean, a lot of times you can get soup on sale, 4 cans for $1. I mean, that's cheap. Older people don't require a lot of calories. The older you get, the less food you eat. But the older you get, the more exercise you need, because you stop exercising or you slow down, and that causes problems too. So there's a lot of dynamics when it comes to high blood pressure, and
if any of our listeners have someone, like if they're struggling with their blood pressure, if they have a loved one that their blood pressure keeps spiking and going up, if they could qualify for home health, that could be a med management issue. It could be a disease education issue. So that is something else we can help with, keeping it down and keeping it under control, coming in and at least monitoring it and teaching them about the ins and outs in a little more depth than what we've talked about today, if that's something that they would qualify for.
Awesome. And then, so now on the low blood pressure front, the biggest issues with the low blood pressure is that it can lead to being mentally foggy, becoming not alert, and possibly even passing out, syncope, which if you are driving, if you're doing something, or even if you're just sitting or standing, that can cause enormous damage to yourself or others. And so if you are checking your blood pressure regularly and you realize that it's pretty low, and you occasionally are feeling a little bit dizzy, you might be on the edge of something that could be an issue, especially if you're driving. But even if you're just sitting, falling out of a chair, you can hit your head really hard on something. So if you find yourself with low blood pressure, look into that, try to figure out what's causing it with your doctor. There are some dietary and lifestyle changes you can make to try to help with that as well. And don't just think that just because you don't have high blood pressure that you are dodging the bullet. If your blood pressure is too low, it can have its own other issues. And is there anything else you wanted to talk about on the issue of blood pressure? Well, we got you on the call.
That just about covers it.
My blood pressure. I'm just kidding. My blood pressure is good. My blood pressure stays like 112/65 almost all the time.
That's good.
125 is when I'm irritated when I'm at
Way to brag, Nicole.
Yeah.
Picture health.
I'm not going to tell you mine, okay?
It's not just adults. I know that's what we focus on here, but my daughter for years, blood pressure would be high every time we would go to the doctor. She struggled with her weight and her blood pressure was high all the time. She would get nosebleeds and they had talked about putting her on medicine, and that was the final visit before it almost like kind of sunk in, and she started taking a little more control of herself and exercising more, and it's under control now, but hers was scary for a while.
Well, that was one of the points I was going to make, that, if you can make those dietary changes and lose weight, a lot of times hypertension will go away. Diabetes will go away sometimes if you lose enough weight and you start exercising and eating the right things. Your diabetes will go away and you won't have to take medication. That's always a joy when a client gets to that point where they don't have to take their diabetic medication anymore because they've done all the things that they need to do to get rid of it. And the thing of it is if you live long enough, you're going to have diabetes at some point in your life. I mean, it's almost a given that you're going to end up with diabetes when you get older, especially if you have family members, that genetic disposition for it. So.
Well, especially if you eat the typical American diet.
Oh yeah, McDonald's,
the death sentence.
Yeah, we don't.
All right,
we're not a good example of healthiness in the United States. So, you don't see these things in Asians very much because, they do have a different type of diet, and they do focus a lot on exercise. So,
yeah, well, hopefully educational segments like this will contribute to a growing movement to change how we live our lives and what we eat and how much we move. But hopefully we educated some people today on blood pressure and the importance of getting it under control, especially if it's running high, and try to avoid the silent killer so that you can stay with us longer. All right. Well, thank you for coming on with us, Janna and Nicole, and I hope everyone has a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Senior Reset podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, please consider sharing with the seniors in your life so they too can live stronger, healthier, and more connected lives. Find all our episodes or submit your questions at signalhg.com/podcast. This podcast is intended for informational use and not as a replacement for medical diagnosis or care. Always consult your doctor if you have a medical issue.